Hello everybody, here we are today talking about the time the New York Islanders nearly won consecutive Stanley Cups. Now before we start talking about it, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or hockey, whatever the case may be. That being said, let's get on into it. So the New York Islanders have won the Stanley Cup 4 times, same as their New York rivals, the Rangers, but haven't been able to celebrate this century, last winning in 1983, where they won from 1980 through 83, 4 consecutive Stanley Cups. And the last time that they appeared in a Stanley Cup final was 1984. However, what if I told you that this team had a chance to win not one, but 2 championships in back-to-back seasons? And now we get to dive into that a bit. So for that, we have to fast forward to the 2019-20 campaign, as the Islanders are fresh off of a 2019 victory over the Pittsburgh Penguins in upset fashion. And then this season, after that, they ended up having 80 points in 68 games played before the regular season was shut down due to COVID. Now, the Islanders weren't the only team to face adversity in this span, but it didn't really matter, as they were able to say that they made it, and this is where things get interesting. And they weren't really scary, offensively at least, in the league, as they ranked 22nd in goals for per 60, 19th for goals for percentage, and had a power play that was ranked 24th in the league. But defensively, things were a little better, as they had the 9th best goals against per 60 and a PK percentage that ranked 15th among their peers. They didn't even have a player average over a point per game, as Matt Barzal was the closest with a 72-point pace. They didn't really care. They were underdogs heading into the playoffs yet again, but again, with the mindset that the Islanders had built, it was okay. They played the Florida Panthers in the qualifying round, where they would beat them in 4 games before taking on the Washington Capitals and beating them in 5 games in an upset. Then in the second round, they would take on a Philadelphia side that was motivated as well. However, they would beat them in a Game 7 affair, going on to play the Tampa Bay Lightning in the Eastern Conference Final. The first time since, I think, 1993 they'd made it to the Eastern Conference Final. Unfortunately, they would lose to the Lightning in 6 games. In Game 6, losing 2-1 to the Bolts, as the Lightning would go on to win the Stanley Cup. Next season, feeling motivated after that Eastern Conference Final run, the divisions were realigned and the Isles were put in a brutal East Division. At the time especially, it looked as a really tough division to be in. Didn't matter though, as they made it into the playoffs, being 4th in the Eastern Division, and they were feeling like maybe, just maybe, we can make things happen again. And just like last season, they didn't really strike fear in you offensively going into the playoffs, as they ranked 21st for goals for per 60 and were 20th for power play percentage. However, defensively, things looked really good for them, as they were 2nd in goals against per 60 and 5th for PK percentage. And just like clockwork, the upsets started happening again, as they would beat the Boston Bruins in 6 games, and then in the second round take out the Pens yet again in 6 games, as they would move to what was called the semifinals that year, conference final basically, where they would play the familiar foe in the Tampa Bay Lightning, the defending champions at that time. This one would go all the way to 7 games. However, unfortunately for the Islanders, they would lose this one 1-0 in that final game, as again, the Lightning would go on to win the Stanley Cup back-to-back seasons. So I can't really guarantee necessarily that the Islanders would have won either of these Stanley Cups in 2020 and 2021. However, we are going to talk about the fact that they very well could have. So we get to look back at the Stanley Cup final losers, the first one being the 2020 Dallas Stars. Dallas was kind of similar to the Islanders in the way that they weren't able to score as much as they would have liked, but they did a relatively good job of keeping the puck out of their end of the net. However, I think while they were able to keep the series close with Tampa Bay over the Stanley Cup final, the big thing holding Dallas back was the fact that they were a very injured side. There's multiple articles written about this. They had plenty of big-name players that were hurt. They had other guys as well that missed massive chunks of the playoffs, didn't even play in the Stanley Cup final. So while the Islanders maybe didn't have the star power that the Lightning had that could have overpowered the Stars, Barry Trotz and this mentality and just having all of his lines just keep coming at you very well could have meant that the Isles would have been able to beat the Stars in a highly contested Stanley Cup final. As for the 2021 losers, the Montreal Canadiens weren't necessarily dominant. They finished 4th in the division with a record of 24-21-11, and a big proponent of them being able to get there was Carey Price taking a dip in the fountain of youth and being able to help this team really go on a tear, upsetting the Vegas Golden Knights in their version of the conference final, the semifinals, which was a big deal. However, things never really were the way you were hoping for if you were a Habs fan in that final, as they would go down 3-0 in the series, win Game 4, but the Bolts really always had the favor on their side, mainly due to star power and just the fact that they were overall a better team. Now again, I can't guarantee that the Islanders would go on to win this series, but with the way that they were set up, if they were able to keep it a low-scoring series, while it might have been ugly, I think out of these two Stanley Cup matchups, this one favors the Islanders a little bit more. However, of course, it is always unpredictable because would the Islanders have been able to score enough goals off of Price? It's tough to say. As for the aftermath, if the Islanders would have won both of these, the first thing that comes to mind is Barry Trotz would have had the last laugh over the Washington Capitals. They were not able to finalize a contract. I think part of that stemmed from them not wanting to pay up, if you will, and we would have seen the Capitals really be frustrated by the fact that they let him go. He would have had a Stanley Cup in 2018, 2020, and 2021, so 3 out of 4 seasons. As a head coach wouldn't be that bad at all, and he would be able to say that he won Stanley Cups with 2 different teams as a head coach. As for Lou Lamoriello, he would be able to say that he was a 5-time Stanley Cup champion as GM, winning 3 with the New Jersey Devils. But so far, no Stanley Cup victories with the Islanders. The last time that he won a Stanley Cup as a GM was the 2003 campaign with New Jersey, which is now over 20 years ago. And so you would have to say that his contracts and some of the decisions he made would have been more, I guess, accepted because of the fact that they have 2 Stanley Cups, which would bring their total to 6. As for some other things, you would see some longtime Islanders like Josh Bailey, Cal Clutterbuck, and Anders Lee be rewarded for their stint and be able to say that they are Stanley Cup champions. Are all these guys going to be individuals end up in the Hall of Fame? Absolutely not. However, they would be immortalized by Long Island fans. Then some other acquisitions like JPG and Cal Palmieri would be widely accepted, despite the fact that Palmieri, I know one playoff had a struggle where he ended up having some good games but weren't able to finish with points. I don't think that he would have been part of the 2020 team, but I do think he would have been part of the 2021 team. And of course, Long Island fans, again, being very happy and saying thank you for being part of this run. Semyon Varlamov as well would get much more respect as time goes on. I unfortunately think he could be one of those goalies that sees his name familiarity with fans disappear as time goes on. However, he's been able to carve out a pretty good career for himself, and had he been able to win 2 Stanley Cups with his team, would probably have a resume good enough for people to remember him more. I'm not saying he will be completely forgotten, just that these 2 Stanley Cups would help him. As for the alternate scenarios, you would see some things like John Cooper possibly getting fired because the Bolts were seen as a team that couldn't get over the hump in the playoffs. They were a side that was relatively great, if not amazing, every single regular season, but not able to get the job done. So maybe he gets the boot, and some key guys like Stamkos, Kucherov, etc. don't end up winning a Stanley Cup, meaning they could be viewed as one of the best teams of an era to not win Lord Stanley. And who knows, maybe the Islanders end up not even winning any of these. Maybe they win one. Again, maybe they win none. And this would set up some more fun situations where you could look at the stars in Tyler Seguin and Jamie Benn, some of these guys being rewarded for all their hard work and turning around this team and creating a very good culture, or revitalizing a good culture in Dallas. You would see maybe a young Miro Heiskanen be more immortalized for the playoff run that he had, especially going into the Stanley Cup final, as Dallas would win their first championship since 1999. As for the Habs, maybe you would see guys like Shea Weber and Carey Price get those cups that they very well deserved in their career but weren't able to get. Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki as well would be seen as a very key duo to be part of this future, like they already are now, but they would be able to say that they were Stanley Cup champions, and it's just more fun as the Habs would win their first championship since 1993. Am I saying that the Islanders would have been guaranteed to win both of these? No, I'm not, but I do think we live in a world where the alternates of what actually happened, or the alternate scenarios of what actually happened, were more fun because these teams had longer droughts. They weren't necessarily nearly as good as Tampa, and we would have seen either a team winning their first Stanley Cup since 99 in Dallas, 93 in Montreal, or 1983 like the Islanders. So that is that. Obviously it didn't happen, but just a fun situation to say, what if the Islanders would have been able to get past Tampa Bay, and how would impacts and legacies have been affected? Are there even more players we could talk about here? Absolutely, but just kind of my quick thoughts about all this. Anyway, what are your thoughts? Would it have been a better world if the Islanders had got past Tampa Bay? Mind you that the Stanley Cup final matchups would have had less talent and maybe been more of that gross style of play that some people don't like, especially more casual fans. Anyway, let me know all that stuff down below in the comments, and please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe, have a great night, and Eagle of Hockey, alright. Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.